At some point in the last few years, you've probably stood over a grave and felt something you couldn't quite explain. Not just sadness, but a kind of weight. The sense that this moment matters in a way that goes deeper than words. What you probably didn't know is that you were participating in the oldest human ritual on Earth. One so old that it predates language. One so old that it predates our species entirely. For most of history, we assumed burial was something we invented. That it was a product of religion, of civilization, of the kind of sophisticated abstract thinking that separates us from every other animal. We were wrong about almost all of that. The evidence coming out of caves and excavation sites over the last few decades has completely dismantled what we thought we knew about when humans started caring for their dead, and more importantly, why. Let's start with what's actually the oldest known evidence. In 2015, a team of researchers working in the Rising Star Cave system in South Africa made a discovery that shook the entire field of paleoanthropology. Deep inside a chamber that was nearly inaccessible, they found the fossilized remains of a hominin called Homo naledi. The bones were arranged in patterns consistent with intentional burial. There were grave cuts, meaning deliberate holes dug into the cave floor specifically to hold the bodies. The skeletons were curled into flexed positions, the same position that would appear in burials across cultures for the next several 100,000 years. And here's the part that upended everything we thought we understood about cognition and ritual. Homo naledi had a brain roughly the size of an orange, less than 600 cubic centimeters. A modern adult human brain runs about 1,500. Scientists had long assumed that complex behaviors like burying the dead required large, sophisticated brains. Homo naledi demolished that assumption entirely. These burials date to somewhere between 226,000 and 335,000 years ago. That's at least 100,000 years before the earliest known Homo sapiens burials. We were not the first. Then came the Neanderthals. For most of the 20th century, Neanderthals were portrayed as brutish, barely conscious creatures stumbling through the Pleistocene without much going on upstairs. Then, archaeologists started looking more carefully at what they left behind. At Shanidar cave in northern Iraq, researchers uncovered the remains of at least 10 Neanderthal individuals buried across different time periods, suggesting the site was used deliberately as a burial location across generations. One individual, known as Shanidar 4, was found with dense clusters of pollen surrounding the body. In 1960, anthropologist Ralph Selecki proposed that the Neanderthal had been buried with flowers. The scientific establishment reacted with skepticism bordering on ridicule. The idea that Neanderthals gather wildflowers to honor their dead was considered almost laughably sentimental. But new analysis published in 2023 in the Journal of Archaeological Science found those pollen clusters were too concentrated and too specifically located to be explained by wind or animals alone. The debate continues, but the broader picture at Shanidar is harder to dismiss. Multiple individuals, repeated use of the same site, deliberate placement of bodies. This wasn't accidental. This was cultural. The earliest confirmed Homo sapiens burial comes from Qafzeh cave in Israel, dating to roughly 100,000 years ago. Researchers found the remains of up to 15 individuals in a single cave, and what made the site extraordinary wasn't just the number of bodies. It was what was found with them. 71 pieces of red ochre, the same iron-rich pigment that would appear in burial sites across the world for the next 90,000 years. Stone tools stained with ochre. And in the arms of one skeleton, the jaw of a wild boar, placed there deliberately before the grave was sealed. Nobody puts a wild boar's jaw in a dead person's arms by accident. That object meant something. The community believed the dead needed it, or deserved it, or that placing it there completed something important. That's not disposal. That's ceremony. And then there's Mtoto. In a cave called Panga ya Saidi on the coast of Kenya, archaeologists discovered the partial skeleton of a child, no more than 3 years old, buried roughly 78,000 years ago. It's the oldest known Homo sapiens burial in Africa. The child had been placed in a pit that was deliberately excavated, not a natural depression in the cave floor, but a hole dug with purpose. The body was arranged in a flexed position, knees drawn toward the chest, the same posture seen at burial sites separated by thousands of miles and tens of thousands of years. Geochemical analysis of the surrounding soil confirmed the body had decomposed in place, meaning the child wasn't moved or repositioned afterward. It was placed there carefully and left. Researchers believe the upper body may have been wrapped or shrouded, and that something soft was placed beneath the head as a kind of pillow. A 3-year-old child, 78,000 years ago, with a pillow. This is where the evidence stops being just archaeology and starts being something harder to categorize. Because what you're looking at across all of these sites, from Homo naledi to Neanderthals to early Homo sapiens spread across 3 continents, is a behavior that appears independently, repeatedly, consistently. Flexed body positions, deliberate pits, pigment, objects placed with the dead. The same choices made over and over by populations that had no contact with each other, separated by geography and time on a scale we can barely comprehend. That's not coincidence. That's something built into us at a level that may predate language, predate religion, possibly predate our own species. What drove it is something researchers still argue about. The practical explanations exist, of course. Dead bodies attract predators. They spread disease. Disposing of them protects the living. But the practical explanation only gets you so far because practical disposal doesn't require ochre or grave goods or a pillow for a 3-year-old. Practical disposal doesn't require flowers. Philip Lieberman, the linguist and cognitive scientist, argued that intentional burial, especially with grave goods, might represent the earliest detectable form of religious thought, a concern for the dead that transcends daily life. The idea that the dead go somewhere, that they might need things, that how you treat a body matters for reasons beyond hygiene. That idea, if Lieberman is right, is at least 78,000 years old. And if the Homo naledi evidence holds, it's older than that by at least another 150,000 years. What's striking, when you actually sit with all of this, is how constant the core behavior has been. The flexed position appears at Shanidar, at Qafzeh, at Panga Saidi, and in Neolithic sites across Europe and Asia thousands of years later. Red ochre appears in Africa 100,000 years ago and turns up in burial mounds on the other side of the world millennia afterward. Ornaments placed on heads and torsos rather than lower bodies, because that's how they were worn in life. The same logic, the same instinct. Grave fields have become one of the primary ways archaeologists reconstruct entire, prehistoric cultures, precisely because burial practices were so deliberate and so consistent that they function almost like cultural fingerprints. What you bury someone with tells you what they were. What you bury them with tells you what you believed. There's a moment that archaeologists describe sometimes when they're working a site and they reach the level of a burial. The shift in soil color, the outline of a pit, the first emergence of bone. And what they're feeling in that moment, that sense of weight and obligation, the instinct to slow down and be careful, to treat what they're uncovering with something like reverence, that instinct is the same one that drove a Neanderthal to carry a body into a cave in northern Iraq 70,000 years ago and arrange it in the dark. The same one that made someone in Kenya fold a child's arms and place something soft beneath its head. Whatever we are now, that part of us is very, very old.